In the previous video, I asked you guys to think about the effects of a change in relative price upon wage, labor allocation, and even output of the two goods. Okay, and here let's talk about it. Okay, and first of all, when the price of cloth increases by 7%. Okay. Once again, that number is just arbitrary. Okay, you can try, a different number, any number you pick. Now, on the graph, this is very straightforward because the prices are constant, right? So we just, because the price now is higher, so we just upward shifted this labor demand curve for cloth. And we find that the new equilibrium point is right here, point 2. In other words, the economy is actually moving from 1 to 2, right? But again, this is just a graphical analysis, and we need to make sense of it. Okay, we need to come up with economic intuition to explain what's really going on here. Okay, now the economic intuition is actually pretty easy. Okay. So when the price of cloth goes up by 7%, we're going to say that compared to the food sector, now the cloth sector becomes more profitable. Okay, because when after the price goes up, for each unit of cloth sold on the market, the cloth producer can actually receive 7% more of revenue, right? Now, because it's more profitable, so it tends to expand. It wants to produce more, right? And the way it can produce more is they offer a higher wage, higher than what the food sector offers, so they could attract some amount of labor from the food sector. Right? Now, once the cloth sector gets more labor, it will be able to produce more. Okay. Now, here again, that's why we see on the graph, the wage rate would be higher. Okay, and we also see that when the equilibrium moves from 1 to 2, that simply means this amount of labor is going to leave the food sector and join the cloth sector. All right. So here we're going to say when only price of cloth rises, the cloth sector becomes more profitable, and it intends to expand. The wage rate rises, but not as much as PC. Now, this is interesting, right? Again, on the graph, this is pretty straightforward. So 7% increase in price. If the wage rate goes up by the same percentage, 7%, it should go from this point here all the way up here. Okay. However, we find that the equilibrium wage is actually W2 here, which is much lower than 7%. Okay, at this point 2 here, the new equilibrium. Now, why is that? Why the nominal wage does not go up by 7%? Now, again, if we follow the economic intuition, this should be easy to understand. When cloth sector offers a higher wage, it attracts more labor from the food sector, right? When cloth factories hire more labor, okay, more workers, you would find that the marginal product of labor would go down. Again, this is because of law of diminishing returns to labor, right? When we have more labor, but a fixed amount of capital, so the labor productivity will decrease. So, in other words, when we shift up this labor demand curve, we find PC is going to be 7% higher, but at the same time, MPLC, marginal product of labor in cloth, would decline. So overall, we find that the nominal wage, which equals this product, right, would still go up, but less than 7%. Okay, so that's why we reach this conclusion. Okay. Right, because labor shifts from the food sector to cloth sector, so the output of cloth rises while that of food falls. Okay, in other words, the relative quantities of output also change as a result here, okay, between the two sectors. Now here, I would suggest you once again to pause the video and think about how are we gonna demonstrate this effect of a change in relative price on output. Okay, how are we gonna demonstrate this effect on the graph? Okay, and which graph we should go to, and how are we gonna do that? Okay. Think about this. Pause the video. All right, now let's talk about this. So we're going to look at the influence upon output. So of course we should look at the PPF, okay? Because the PPF shows the combination of output between the two products, right? So here what we're saying is at the beginning, the economy produces at point 1, so QF1, that's the amount of food, and QC1, that's the amount of cloth. So this combination offers the optimal allocation of labor between the two sectors. Okay. Now, because the price of cloth rises, so this ratio here becomes larger, right? And that means here the tangent line gets steeper. So we're actually moving along the PPF from point 1 to point 2. Okay. Now at point 2, as we already mentioned, the food output would decline, whereas the cloth output would rise. Okay, which is exactly what we find at point 2. Okay. All right. So here we already discussed the effect upon wage, nominal wage, allocation of labor between the two sectors, and output of cloth and food, right? Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, which is super important for us to understand the distributional effect of international trade, is the influence of this change in relative price upon real income. Okay, the real income of workers, capital owners, and land owners. Okay, now for the previous case, when both prices are rising proportionally, we said that there was no change at all, right? The real income of these three groups of people stay the same. Okay, but here I would leave these for you guys to think about. Okay, so when only one price changes, or when the relative price between the two products changes, what happens to these, the real incomes? Okay, for workers, capital owners, and land owners. And when you come to the class, we're gonna discuss these. Okay, as I said, this is super important.